I think we're live.
All right. Blessings, everyone, and welcome to the LYHT podcast. We are a transformational and uplifting podcast. We're here to help every single individual on the planet learn to live in alignment with their highest truth through sharing beautiful change makers and people that are out to make a difference on the planet and interviewing magical people from all over the world. We're committed to uniting communities and healing with love and art and truth and help you realize your spiritual awakening. And this podcast was created and realized through me, myself, Maya McClean, and my beautiful co-host, Krystle Mishra. We connected through a beautiful event that I was doing on Clubhouse, and we kind of had some conversations about putting together this beautiful podcast, and yeah, we're right in the flow of it, in the midst of it, and it's been a beautiful journey so far, having these wonderful guests. A little bit about myself first. I'm a spiritual life coach and healing musician. I also offer vocal empowerment sessions and work remotely online. I have a beautiful program called Passion to Purpose, where I help my clients integrate and live in alignment with their dharma, their intuition, dive into self-love and their spirituality, and learn to live a life of passion and purpose. And I'm also offering beautiful healing chakra retreats down here in Mexico, and also offer group sessions as well for anyone who wants to work in community and transform with multiple beautiful entities and beings together online. And yeah, I'd love to turn it over to Krystle so she can share a little bit about herself and her path.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm simple. I'm just, dedicated to the path of self-realization. And I think there's a tremendous amount of healing that can happen through, divine conversation and sharing wisdom. And hopefully it'll inspire people to live more authentically, but more importantly, just, living straight from love.
Beautifully said, darling. Beautiful. And Krystle is a beautiful host. Her gift is in sharing and asking questions of all these beautiful change makers. So this is a perfect platform for her to express her passion. And it's been an honor to work with you during these beautiful interviews. So bringing us to today, this is our 5th episode, and it's about the ayahuasca experience. And we have our beautiful guest here, Shannon Amos, joining us. And Shannon is a beautiful shamanic medicine woman. She is the founder of Samana, and she offers luxury healing and medicine retreats also here in Mexico. This is where we met. And as soon as we felt each other's energy, we were like soul sisters. I love that her humble, sweet nature, and our relationships growing deeper and deeper and interacting on our beautiful retreat journeys together. And yeah, it was just a total yes to have her share her journey and her mission and her path and her retreats and her experience with ayahuasca here today. So welcome.
Thank you both. I'm just really grateful to be here, and I'm honored and humbled to be of service. Thank you.
Yeah. Beautiful. So how did you get on this journey around offering these beautiful retreats, hosting people through their journey of ayahuasca? And yeah, what was that calling for you? How did you come into this path?
It was sort of a process of unfolding. In 2016, my mom passed, and before she transitioned, we knew she was actively transitioning. And before she transitioned, I asked her if she had any regrets, if there was anything she, had regretted in her life. And she said only that she didn't get to travel and see the world. And so I said, well, what if I took your ashes and I traveled the world with you? And her beautiful blue eyes lit up, and she smiled, and she said, well, Shannon, go see the world and let the world see you. And I thought in that moment, how profound is that? For me, it meant to really see people, connect with people on a deeper level, on a heart-centered level, and to show up, as just my best self. And so I backpacked solo across Southeast Asia for a year, and I carried her ashes and I took her to some of the world's most beautiful places. And in the process, I studied meditation. I became a certified yoga teacher, studied Ayurveda and meditation and mindfulness. And then I found myself in Peru. And with a beautiful people, the Shipibo, Indigenous people of the Amazon. And I experienced my first sit with the grandmother of plant medicine, ayahuasca. And it was literally in my first sit that I received the download that I would be holding space for people of color. And after that first night, which was quite rough because I had a hard time surrendering, I'll get into that later. Initially, I was in my ego and I was like, no way am I doing that much work. And I was resisting, in sort of a bit of resistance, but later it would unfold that I would step into this calling and start this work.
Beautiful. I am someone who is quite new to ayahuasca. I've never used the plant medicine, or I haven't experienced the plant medicine personally yet. So anyone in the audience who's new to this, you'll probably relate to my questions. So I'd love to ask you about where ayahuasca was birthed from. Which Indigenous Amazonian tribe from my understanding, that's where it came from. Where's the history? Where's the wisdom? Where does it originate from?
Well, while it's found in Central America and South America, there's new studies now that show it may even come from places such as Africa, because there is another plant, the grandfather of plant medicine, called ibogaine, which is like the stronger version of Aya, which is now starting to make some waves in Western culture. But we do know for sure that it was used hundreds of years ago in indigenous cultures in South America, Central America. And it is a component of two plants. It is, and I'm just going to look because I always butcher the name, the Banisteropis vine. There's a vine and a shrub that are actually boiled down into a brew with water, and it's a psychoactive brew that helps the brain to release DMT. And so it's these two plants with water, and sometimes other plants. It's different with each tribe and in each indigenous group what it's blended with. So sort of different shamans have their own recipes, and sometimes different species of the plant. But this plant is boiled down into a tea, and then it's consumed orally.
Beautiful.
And we also believe that in indigenous culture that each plant holds its own spirit and has sort of its own personality. And so oftentimes people who sit with ayahuasca experience a feminine presence or a feminine voice. And so this is, I believe, why it's been called the grandmother of plant medicine. She's gentle but stern and often gives you what you need and not necessarily what you want. And so the experience with grandmother ayahuasca, as we affectionately call her, I call her Mama Aya, is that she presents herself as a mirror. And often wherever we are in our subconscious mind, or whatever things, stories, narratives, or even experiences that we hold in our body, including trauma, suffering, anxiety, pain, these things that we store deep down in our subconscious, often become a part of her showing as a mirror. Like she may take you on a journey where you actually see things from a different perspective. And this also allows us to do some deep healing work.
Beautiful.
Beautiful.
So I'm curious. There's many ways in which we can take this conversation, but I think the first thing that comes to mind is, how do you know, how does one know when it's time to sit with this medicine? Because we were speaking earlier about sometimes the medicine calls to you, and then there are those who go and chase it, hoping to have a certain experience. So for anyone who's contemplating ayahuasca or may have done it before, how do you know when it's time to sit with that medicine?
I think that's a really great question, Krystle, especially right now, because there's a lot of conversation around healing with psychoactive plants. including ayahuasca and psilocybin and others. And I think that it's really important, one, that you really do feel like a spiritual connection or some type of call or pull to experience this. And especially right now, because it's entering more and more into mainstream conversations. There's more news around it, more podcasts around it, more YouTube videos around it. And so people are curious. And I would just say, before jumping into something like this, that it's really important that you really, truly, do some self-inquiry. Is this something that you're ready to do? Because ayahuasca and the journey with ayahuasca is not necessarily just a trip or a journey or some outward experience. It requires quite a bit of work and self-introspect and a deep dive inward. And a lot of times when people, step into this, they don't understand how deep that work can be, and that there may be things that you've suppressed in your subconscious mind that are living there that haven't been explored yet. So, and you may come face to face with that. So I think that it's really important to see this as a part of your elevation of consciousness versus just like, I'm going to go in the jungle for a party.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, you hear the stories of people who experience a death-like, a potential ego death or a death-like experience. I've heard the stories of the purging. And so it's always made me curious about, it's always made me curious about, the intention behind why people go and chase these experiences, because ayahuasca is, from my understanding, it's not a pleasure seeking necessarily medicine, correct? Like the mother.
It's not pretty. Let's say that. Yeah. It's not a pretty experience.
Yes, it's not like psilocybin, for example, which we call psilocybin, which is mushrooms for those who don't know. Psilocybin is psychoactive as well. And we kind of tend to call that the grandchild of plant medicine, because they're sort of like, it's more playful. And, you can still have a deep healing experience with psilocybin when you're guided by someone who's educated. However, it tends to be lighter, more colorful, more playful, if you will. And, depending on the strain or whatever, you'll have a different experience. Ayahuasca can challenge us in many ways, but you can also have very beautiful experience. To your point, the purge. Oftentimes that's the first thing I hear from people is like, oh my God, I don't want to throw up. I hate throwing up. Like, I don't know anyone who likes that. But it's not always just vomiting. Your purge could show up in many ways, and it could be sweating, crying, laughing, the need to use the restroom. It could be all of the above. And of course, it could be vomiting. There's been ceremonies I've sat where I didn't have, the vomit, but maybe I had chills or maybe I felt hot. So it can show up in a lot of different ways. Absolutely. And it's not something that a lot of people ask me, is it addictive? And I would say, I don't think too many people really want to go through that process over and over and over again. So I think that taking time in between is important too.
Yeah, to integrate. I wanted to share a little bit about my ayahuasca journey. Whenever I experience experiences that are amazing and made a huge impact on my life, like I'm always ready to go, oh, if someone's sharing that they're having issues, and I always want to share what my experience has been, and maybe it could help them in that area. But with ayahuasca, it's never something that I recommend for people unless you're feeling the call for yourself. And in my personal journey, I'd never done any drugs. I'd never been drunk before. And then I ended up having a Kundalini awakening. And after I had that experience, and then I heard about ayahuasca because I'd never heard of it before. And then people were sharing the journey, and I was like, oh, it actually feels like I'm literally just connecting to source and spirit and the oneness of the universe. And I was relating it to my Kundalini experience. And as soon as I heard about it, I was like a no to anything, drugs, anything mind altering, nothing. But as soon as I heard about ayahuasca and the journey and the ceremony, and you actually, your intention is to elevate and awaken, I was like a yes straight away. And then from there, I did actually hear the call for like about a year. I didn't go looking for it, but I was like just sitting in my yes until like a situation came up, and then I was invited to a ceremony, and it was just like a full-on yes. And my experience with the purging, I don't think I didn't have a concern or a problem with the purge, but I did have the experience of purging through my front end and my back end, which was hilarious. And I made the mistake of not fully going to the toilet before we started the ceremony. And then in my intentions, because when we did our ceremony, everyone sets intentions, and I think the intentions are the most important part, because it kind of holds you in your kind of like you're in this dance with the plant and with the energy and the grandmother. But when you set your intentions, it's kind of like she hears and helps guide you through what you're wanting to kind of experience in a way. So in a certain sense, you have a little bit of like a kind of like a boundary, or like a little bit of control over what you're what you're kind of bringing into it. This was my experience. I fully got all of my intentions set. And then when the intentions were gone, then I felt like I was kind of floating in the universe a little bit. But yeah, so having that journey was amazing. And what I'd learned from the purging, because I had this like little bucket, and the medicine I had was probably about that much. I don't know what amount it was, but I just was like in full surrender. I said, yep, it's been calling, let me just take it. I didn't know if there were any measurements or any differentiation. I was just all in. And but then in the morning when I looked in my bucket, there was literally the same amount as the medicine. It was like there was nothing that came out of my body into the bucket, but the purging was like a full-on energetic purge. Like it was that came out of my purging. So it felt like I was vomiting a lot, but it wasn't really. So that was like really interesting to feel the difference of the energy that was coming out, but it wasn't anything in the physical world. It wasn't really there. It was funny. But
I think you're
definitely
lucky to have had that experience, because one of the things that we always talk with people is about surrendering, because a lot of times people come into Aya thinking that they can control part of their journey. Mm-hmm. And so in our teaching, we suggest that the intention is an anchor to ground you when you start to go off into places that are very uncomfortable, to come back to your breath, like in meditation, to center yourself and to surrender and trust the process of the medicine. Because I think the hardest part about the medicine for so many people coming into their first ayahuasca experience is that they don't want to give up control. Many people like yourself, myself, I wasn't a drug user. I wasn't, taking psychoactive pills or meds or anything prior to this. Not a big drinker. I might have a social like glass of wine or something, but so the same. But across the board, sitting with people, I find that the biggest fear is giving up control. And it's like, what happens that moment that the medicine kicks in and I can no longer have control over myself. And what's beautiful is that there's levels to this also, is that it doesn't knock you out. Ayahuasca doesn't knock you out. You're not unconscious. You're fully aware of who's next to you, who's in the room, what's happening. You may be having some outward visions, but you are still aware of who you are and where you are. You can get up and use the bathroom. You might be wobbly. You might need assistance, but you can move within it. It's not like you're trapped and laid out or blacked out.
So what's happening from a technical perspective? So the medicine releases DMT. Now, DMT is something that and please correct me if I'm wrong, the stomach does not produce DMT, but the mind or the brain, the pineal gland, has the capacity to naturally produce DMT. So when DMT is released, I guess, in the body, I understand it lasts around 20 minutes. But how long does an ayahuasca experience last with the various dimensions of things that are happening, both spiritually, energetically, and physically?
Yes, it can last 6 hours, 10 hours. I've been in ceremonies that have lasted 12 hours. I find that when we have a lot of first time people, we tend to go longer
Mhm.
before they come down. And what it does is it stimulates the amygdala, the part of the brain that stores our memories. And so a lot of those things that we have in our subconscious mind, a lot of those old thoughts, the old traumas, joy, beautiful experiences. Some people even are able to go back as far as being in their mother's womb. Sometimes they're ancestral visions, but generational the generational visions, and epigenetic scientists now say that we carry 7 generations of experiences and trauma in our DNA. And so it's not unlikely to have an experience that might be very tribal. Like for me, I've experienced journeys in Africa and visions in other realms, cosmic realms, but it's also been I've also experienced being in my mother's womb and being birthed into this experience. And sometimes even in talking or looking at things that I know, like how was that I could recall something from being born that actually was real, or was it something told to me, or was it a real memory? But I've sat with people many times who've had these experiences and they've gone home to talk to their mother or their father, and they're like, how do you remember that? You were like 2.
Mhm.
But we carry these experiences in our body.
Mm. So that leaves
When
me.
you
That's okay.
sorry, did you want to go?
No, go ahead.
I just wanted to ask you, in your retreats and like at the completion of these ceremonies, depending on how long they're going for, I wanted to ask you, how long do you sit with the participants of the medicine or the receivers of the medicine after the experience is done? Because I had an experience that was I felt like it was cut short, like and I actually had kind of tried a medicine that was really strong, and in my preference as a being, like I felt like I wasn't held in a safe container long enough after the experience. So how does that work with the way that you hold space?
With the way that we hold space, first of all, there's a preparation before we even do the IS. So the moment that our clients make contact with us, we're ushering them into the dieta. And the dieta is it doesn't have to be super strict, but it's pretty much a plant-based diet of fruits and vegetables, limited protein like fish and chicken, but we actually try to encourage you to stay plant-based. The notion behind it is the cleaner you are, the better your experience will be. So you're already elevating your body, your mind, and your spirit by consuming more plant foods, fruits and vegetables. There's certain foods that we suggest that you stay away from, because this is a very intelligent plant and other plants can interact with that plant. So things that we avoid right before ceremony include garlic and onions, and heavy spices. And so we start to prepare the body first. The other part that we suggest our clients do is that we have them be mindful of what they're consuming. So if you're consuming horror movies, pornography, things of this nature, it's very likely that you may have this show up as a part of your experience during ceremony. And so it's being mindful of what you're consuming, mind, body, and spirit. And then we also suggest that you begin your practice, a meditation practice, a breathwork practice, perhaps yoga or movement, to open the body up to receive the medicine. And usually what happens when we have people who are really serious about this work, it's like everyone in the room has this heightened, magnificent experience. But when we are doing things prior to ceremony, including sex, we even say don't have sex 3 days before, because you can bring your partner's subtle energies into the experience with you. And then you don't know why you're having, such a strange experience. And we also remind our guests that every single experience is unique. You can watch as many YouTube videos as you want. You can talk to as many people as you want, and no one is going to be able to tell you what your thumbprint is, because your experience is going to be just as unique as you are.
That's beautifully said. I'm so glad that you talked about the purity of the vessel. That's something that that really resonated with me the most is I was listening to a talk with Sadhguru, and he was talking about the plant medicine and how it can really be used to clean the vessel, of all the parasites and various different things that are toxic to the body that we consume. And so this is, if you are coming into this ceremony, I would assume with a clean vessel that you might have a more positive experience. Yes. And if you are consuming toxins, cigarettes, or eating junk food, processed foods that are foreign to the body, I can only imagine that the response to the medicine would show you exactly what that type of toxicity is actually doing to you. I mean, it's just going to reveal what is already inside.
Absolutely. And in addition to the fact that sometimes we have people who come into ceremonies who will tell me afterwards, I didn't feel it, I wasn't in the medicine, but then they may mention something that they saw or experienced during their journey. And oftentimes I will challenge them to dig a little bit deeper, because a lot of times those are people who are coming in with big expectations on what's going to unfold. And perhaps the medicine is going to walk you like baby steps into the process. Maybe you're not going to get it all the first time. Maybe you're only going to get a snapshot the first time. It is really different every single time. The key is surrendering. A lot of times we come in and we want to control what that's going to look like. And it's in that resistance. When we're in the resistance of anything in our lives, we hit walls and we go into dark spaces. And typically when people come in and they're resisting anything, perhaps it's an area of trauma in their life that they don't even want to look at. And then all of a sudden they're face to face with what that is. And they're still trying to resist. Then, everything, the body, just like in our daily lives, may react in a certain way, right? So now you're purging, now you're expelling these things because you're in this resistance mode. It really is amazing and powerful medicine, but it should be done with care and with facilitators who absolutely know what they're doing, who have been vetted. It's just so important.
All right, so what's the why? Why do ayahuasca? What is the healing benefit? What's the transformational capacity of having a medicine like this as an experience?
Well, I'm so grateful, first of all, that although Indigenous people have known this for hundreds of years, science is finally catching up. And for those who need a scientific peer-reviewed document, there are now actual universities, Ivy League colleges, universities that are studying the effects of ayahuasca. Unfortunately, the US has put a patent on it and they're trying to synthesize it and find a way to pull the spiritual component out and make it a pill. But, let's pray that doesn't happen anytime in the near future, because I think all of it is an important part of the experience. Why do it? And I think some of the benefits will help answer that question. Benefits include supporting or helping people who struggle with addiction, anxiety, PTSD, depression, things like racial trauma, sexual trauma, abuse, many things that we experience through our lifetime, as women of color, as human beings. Ayahuasca has been proven now to be a huge help in assisting in the process. But I always say this to people, that all of the answers are within you. You don't have to do a psychoactive medicine to heal yourself. This shouldn't be seen as a cure. It should be seen as a tool that can assist you in your process. Mm-hmm. And we also say that like ayahuasca can be like 15 years of therapy in one night. And so some of those things that we maybe have been hanging on to, that we're not even aware that we're hanging on to, can sometimes be dealt with in a ceremony, but also in the integration process that follows.
Okay.
And some people have had use it to help like heal physical ailments in the body as well. Is that correct?
I think the jury is still out on that, and I only say it in this way. I think that when you get your mind, body, and spirit in alignment, you can cure anything, right? Like the body has such a powerful ability to heal. And so I think more of the philosophy is around once you heal this and you get in an alignment that you're able to heal from certain things. But for sure, I have seen people, even our own guests, who have left ceremony, who are off anti-anxiety medications like Zoloft and what are some of the other antidepressants, Xanax, etc.
Stay away from all those.
Yeah, all of them. I mean, we've had clients who've come in who were on cocktails of prescription medications who are now, in their second year, first year of being off of all of their meds and feeling good. And we also give some support into how they can continue to do that if they need to microdose with psilocybin or something like that, so that they can maintain that sense of well-being without having to get back on prescription meds, which have side effects.
Yeah.
It's awesome. Amazing.
Yes.
Really awesome benefits.
So integration. Now, this is the piece that I think many people, no, I won't say many people, but some people perhaps bypass, and it's such an integral component. So what does integration mean exactly? And why is it so critical to make sure that it's done?
Absolutely. It's critical because sometimes we go into ceremony and things come up that we're not aware of, or past trauma that we've held on that maybe we've created a mental block around. Like, I'll just use an example of sexual abuse. We've had experiences where someone, it was revealed in ceremony who the abuser was, or what the actual trauma was that's created all of these issues throughout their life that they weren't even aware of because perhaps they were so young. Maybe it was even just, something like a parent yelling or saying something hurtful that they didn't remember that created a ripple effect throughout their life. Whatever it was, whatever that trauma is, having it come up, and it doesn't always come up. Now, mind you, some people have beautiful, joyful ceremonies, but if you sit with it enough, it's very likely you're going to do some shadow work. And when that comes up, it's really important to have the tools to process and integrate what you've learned. And initially we always say that if something really difficult came up, that you should consult with a therapist or some type of coach or someone who can help you work through the heavier layers of that. And then from another aspect, there's other processes that you can put into place, starting to create ceremonies and rituals in your life to honor yourself, changing your diet and your patterns. A lot of times people come out of ayahuasca and they're able to transcend some of their self-limiting beliefs. And so now is a great time because when you do ayahuasca, you're firing up new neurons in the brain, right? And you're creating new neural pathways. And when you're creating these new neural pathways, it's like the brain is more pliable. You can take in all this new information. And so while you're taking in this information, it's really important that you are, just like before ceremony, consuming all the goodness and all the beauty and all the things that you need to elevate your consciousness. So having integration be a part of that is important. And it can look like many things, from counseling to getting into a practice, your own spiritual practice, rituals, ceremonies. It can be journaling, and it can be getting into a program where, like a formal integration program, and I'm happy to answer more questions about what that looks like. But it's sort of a culmination of all these things that helps you to take the lessons that you've learned in this process and apply them towards your daily life.
And the gifts, I'm assuming, that are going to come out of that, the creative gifts that people realize, like, wow, I have genius and talents inside of me that I have never been exposed to before, now that I've cleared out the blocks.
Yes, I've seen people come out of Aya ceremonies, including myself, and learn how to play an instrument. I've never played an instrument. Now all of a sudden I feel like I have it.
Love it.
People come out and create companies such as myself. You know, they get downloads, and I'm not the only one. I've read many stories about people who've come into Aya and got like some brilliant idea and acted on it. You know, there's so many downloads that happen. And so what do you do with that? And that's a part of the integration. What do you do with the messages that you got, the lessons that you sat with, even sometimes people talk about geometric patterns or visions, and what does that mean in a deeper level? And the beautiful thing is that after Aya, it's like there's still an unfolding that happens. The lessons continue to come, and you know, and journaling is a big part of that, because you might not remember something the day after Aya, and then all of a sudden a month later you're like, I finally get it. I get it. I know what that was about now, you know, and so we're helping people to understand those things.
Yeah, I'd like to speak on the on getting insight like years later. Earlier this year, I had kind of had a realization from one of my experiences when I first did ayahuasca, which was probably like 6 years ago. And when I was in ayahuasca, some of the confronting part was my experience of feeling scared to be alone or in the dark. And of course, when the ceremony had ended, I needed to go to the restroom a bunch of times, and the restroom was outside of this little yurt in the desert. And I had to go outside and kind of confront my fears of being alone and in the dark by having to go out to the toilet every time. And of course, there was coyotes in the background and like things that were like challenging my own experience of that experience of feeling alone. And it was like walking through and facing my fears every time. And I think I went like 4 or 5 times and kept going back in, resting, and then needed to get up and go again. That was a major part of it. And I was I'd done a lot of self-work before, and I was kind of integrating that as part of my own journey of feeling of when my dad left me in the car when I was a kid, and feeling like I was left alone in that car. And I was working through that process. But a new realization that I had, I've been working with a channel, and I was listening to, I think it was another channel, I was just kind of gaining some wisdom, and he was talking about spirit and source, and how inside of the creation of this beautiful reality that we have, we get to interact with ourselves, with each other. We're all source, and we get to have that experience of ourselves, and instead of the feeling of that singularity and that oneness, which was what I experienced in ayahuasca, I was in the oneness and was fully experiencing what it is to just be in the oneness, where I'm not in the physical body and I'm everything. So when I started listening to this channel, what came to me was, it was kind of like the experience of source when it's not in physical form can have the experience of like the aloneness of in the oneness. Mm-hmm. And I felt like that was the bigger energy that I was tapping into, and I was kind of singularity relating it to my own human experience, but it actually felt like a spiritual, like spirit feels alone. When it's not in physical form, to have it, you know, this energy to bounce back and forth with, like there is this aloneness feeling that was there. And that was something that kind of came to me like this year from 6 years ago. I was like, oh, okay. First I was working through my human, but then it actually felt like the experience of the oneness and how that can feel, you know, like I actually felt, oh, spirits feels alone, and there's like this feeling of this aloneness that it can experience in the oneness. I was like, oh, so cute. I love us, you know.
Yes, yes. And you know, think of it like this: when you're in the medicine in ayahuasca, you're in a heightened state. You're in a heightened state of whatever your experience is, and so when we're in this heightened mental state, emotions are heightened. Feelings are heightened, senses are stimulated, everything is heightened. And we often come out of ceremony like in this super love vibration of heightened love. You know, everybody loves everybody after Aya, and we're just like, it becomes a love fest. You're just like, oh, I just love you. Right? We got through this experience. We're all alive. We're all okay. Everything's great. when we go home and that heightened experience starts to dissipate and we want to stay elevated, that's where the integration and the work comes in. And that's where we can do things like breath work that release natural DMT in the brain, and where we can still achieve a very similar experience just through the breath. That's where mindfulness comes into play, where we can become mindful of some of the narratives and stories that may have come up during ceremony, if that's the experience that we have. And also the perspective from trauma. Like when we're in Aya, oftentimes what it does is it may show us like a movie or an experience in our lifetime that was very traumatic for us, but it may give us a different perspective. And then all of a sudden it's like, all these years I've been holding on to this thing. And now I realize that there was another perspective to it. And I've been watching the same movie over and over. And now I have a new movie. And what do I do with that? And so that's where the therapy and the support can come in. So, I think if people are intentional about really wanting to heal with plant medicine, then, and they feel truly called, then that may be something that's worth some investigation. But if you're just, it's not for you, you're not ready to go there, then I would never say, go do this medicine. I would say, take your time and look at other natural healing modalities or even baby steps before you jump in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that you mentioned earlier about the sacred geometry, because I know the amazing Terence McKenna had spoken about that quite a bit through his experience, and that everything in existence actually has a very sacred geometry, and there's a emotional and intellectual wisdom to sacred geometry, and it's a whole other realm, and I hear people who've experienced other dimensions and other realms, and seeing our being outside of form and actually reconnecting to who we actually are, because we're not Shannon, Krystle, and Maya. I mean, we are to a small degree, but there's so much more to who we are outside of our form and our name and our material bodies. And so, you hear these amazing stories of, spiritual leaders and philosophers who have come out of ayahuasca experience and almost, seeing perspective of life and how we integrate with life from a completely different dimension and perspective. And I think that to me is what calls me the most, is how can I take my already, path to enlightenment or path to self-realization to the next level, and how to integrate that in my day-to-day. So that's something that really calls out to me. And if I do decide, if it does happen for me in this experience, that's what I'm most looking forward to, is because I know that this temporary human experience is just a place for me to reconnect back to my true source, which is my soul.
Yes. And I think that that's so beautiful, because when you come into a ceremony with those type of intentions, with really heart-centered reasons for wanting to do the work, whether the work is healing past trauma or just to, accelerate or elevate in the work that you're doing to be a conscious human on this planet, I feel like the lessons that it gives you is just incredible. And I see that happen often, because in the spaces that I'm holding, I oftentimes have women coming in who are already like yourself and Maya, who are consciously making the choice to be beautiful human beings, who are already mindful of what they're consuming, already, intentional about the way that they live. And I feel a completely different vibration in those containers. And we have completely different experiences in those containers versus, say, going to an Aya ceremony where there's 35 or 40 people. There's no integration afterwards. Some people are coming to hang out. Some people are coming to, just see what it is because they heard about Will Smith doing it or somebody else doing it. Those aren't the intentions that you want. You want these type of intentions. And what happens when you come in like that is otherworldly. That's the best
Mhm.
way I can put it. You have experiences that will change your life forever. And that's, I think, what we want the intention to be.
Yeah. Can we talk about that though for a second? Because I think it's important, which is misconceptions and spiritual bypassing, and people, it is becoming more mainstream, which means there's a lot the sacredness of the medicine. It's not even viewed as a medicine. I mean, people view it as a drug. So, maybe we can speak a bit about some of the misconceptions so that people are not, misled.
Absolutely. And I'm so happy that you brought that up about some people believe it's a drug. And I would say this: Western society has labeled it a drug because they've colonized it, misappropriated it, and now they're looking at ways to profit off of it. Because we come from a capitalistic society. And when we think about people of color, in communities of color, people have been traumatized by the capitalization on drugs. We're criminalized more than anyone else when it comes to things like even marijuana, which has been deemed a drug. But yet, if we look at these plants in their natural state, without any chemicals being put on them, they're all healing plants. It's just, how are we consuming them? How are we using them in our lives? And now, now all of a sudden, what was a horrible drug, marijuana, remember the commercial, this is your brain on drugs and all that? Now it's actually legalized in many places and it's used for medicinal components. But again, it comes back to colonization, capitalization, and all those other things. And the misappropriation of Indigenous people, Indigenous folks have been using this as a medicine for hundreds of years for enlightenment. It's spoon fed to babies in many cultures and microdosed by women and men in villages in many cultures. And now that it's moving into mainstream, culture, of course, there are concerns about the ability to even maintain what it needs in the Amazon to grow and thrive, and that it can even be a medicine that's affordable now for the very people who are growing it. It takes hundreds of years for one ayahuasca tree to grow. And if we're chopping down these trees and consuming them at a rate faster than they can grow, then pretty soon there will not be a medicine. So part of my mission with my company is that we're connecting with local communities, that we're going to go back into these communities and help plant trees and help find ways to support the Indigenous people who, have been working with this medicine as a part of their lineage. So the spiritual bypassing piece as well is that there are a lot of people out here who see a way to profit off of this, and they're not honoring the traditions, they're not honoring the medicine, and some of them are bypassing altogether. They sit one time and they're like, oh, I can make money doing this and this can be popular, and I'm getting all this attention for it, and so I'm just now going to do this. And that's very dangerous, because we see in ceremony, a lot of things happen. And if you don't have the right care team there, if you don't have people who know how to truly work with the medicine, then it could become a dangerous situation. And, it's important that you're vetting these shamans, that you're doing your research, you're researching the holistic retreat centers, all of it, to find out exactly what it is that they're doing, and how they've worked throughout the years. I couldn't even imagine sitting in ceremony with somebody who just one time, two times had done it. That would be really scary.
Thank you for your work that you're doing. Thank you so much. I just wanted to honor you for that, because that is so important. And yeah, I mean, we can go on a topic on that, but it really touches my heart, because these are sacred Indigenous traditions and wisdom and medicine, and it hurts when it's been taken out of its context and then being sold and commodified, and somebody who doesn't even understand the sacredness of it is making profit off of it. That's dangerous, and that happens a lot in the world. And it's what happens when we have poor leaders. So that's a whole other topic, but it's very important, as you said, for anyone who is traveling to South America, to make sure that you honor the tribes and the traditions. I mean, I would even say doing that will give you a positive or a better ayahuasca experience, because you're honoring it and the energy exchange is going to be pure.
Yes, absolutely. Unfortunately, when I'm holding these spaces, people come to me and they tell me, oh, I did Aya in a backyard in Chicago. Oh, girl, I did Aya in a warehouse in New York. And I'm like, what? Like, I can't even imagine, and also the vulnerability of women and being in the medicine in a safe space is so important for women and men, because unfortunately, this is just a microcosm of the world. There are going to be predators everywhere in the world. So you just have to be mindful of where you're going, who you're sitting with, and that you're in a safe space. And one of the reasons why I created this space was because when I first went into my first Aya ceremony, I was one of 3 people of color in the room. And while it was beautiful and amazing, I'm biracial, I have no problem sharing space with anyone. I just felt like, wow, I wish there were more of us here, because I know the issues that we've dealt with, like racism and microaggressions and, just trauma living in the US. What would it look like if this was a room full of Black and brown people or people of color? And and that's exactly what I was guided to do. So I've created this space, and now we're doing retreats for just women of color, and we're also doing retreats that will be open for co-ed and eventually perhaps all. But right now we're being very specific about creating this safe space because there's not many out there, and we've looked. There's really not much out there, so that's what we're doing.
And where can anyone who's listening, where can they get more information on your retreats? How can they contact you?
Absolutely. You can go to Sumanah, SUMANAH.com. Sumanah means in Sanskrit to bloom, to grow. And so we just plant the seed so you can grow. And we offer several services. Sumanah is my wellness transformative travel brand. It's a luxury travel brand. And then we have Sumanah Soul Sanctuary, which is our plant medicine retreats, and Sumanah Heal at Home. So you can heal anywhere. And you can go to our website and learn more about the work we're doing and learn about upcoming retreats. And you can also find me on social media on Sumanah Soul Sanctuary, or my personal Instagram, which is official Shannon Amos.
When I'm ready, I'm gonna come and see you.
I would love that. I would love
you. I would be honored to have you host a ceremony like that for me.
Oh, well, I would be
I'll have to bring my mom.
Have you both. Absolutely.
Sure. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing your wisdom and your magic and your presence and your beautiful offerings to the world.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Krystle.
Thank you.
Thank you, Meg. I appreciate you both, and I hope you have a beautiful day wherever you all are. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you would want to connect with Maya and Maya, what's the best way to connect with you?
You can visit my website, which is my first and last name, mayamcclean.com, or you can find me on Instagram, which is Maya McClean, or at Maya McClean. Also on Facebook, which is maya.mcclean.2, and you can reach out to me with any questions that you might have on anything that we've discussed today or any of our retreats that we have coming up. I have my second retreat. I just completed my first 8-day chakra healing retreat in the jungle, and we have our second one coming up in November. So we're opening that up for anyone interested in coming and doing that healing work with us. And yeah, I have 2 more slots too available for my Passion to Purpose online program for anyone that wants to work remotely with me too. So just send me a DM and I'd love to connect and go from there.
Lovely.
And what about you, Krystle? Do you want to share yours?
Yeah, I mean, I'm available on Instagram, KrystleNM. You can also find me on Maya's page. So thank you so much for everyone who tuned in.
Thanks everyone for joining. We'll see you next